Hello and thank you for joining us on The World Today right here on China Global Television Network. From Nairobi, I'm Mahia Mutua. We begin with our top story where Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, has chaired a leadership meeting to map out immediate rescue and relief responses in the wake of the devastating mudslide that hit Zhejiang County in southwest China's Xizang Autonomous Region. Xi, also Chinese president and chairman of the Central Military Commission, opened the meeting alongside other leaders with a moment of silence to mourn lives lost in the disaster. The meeting noted that the disaster occurred in a high altitude and cold region with many geological dangers making rescue operations difficult. It said all relevant parties must put the people and their lives first and called for strengthening joint consultations at all levels, enhancing monitoring and early warning, as well as preventing secondary disasters. It also called for emergency assistance to disaster-stricken areas in Nepal and international cooperation in rescue operations. Now, the meeting pointed out the need to implement personnel evacuation measures, such as setting up evacuation routes and resettlement sites in high-risk zones. It also called for building up key rescue forces and improving the emergency response capability to tackle problems like broken roads, power loss and disrupted network in remote areas. Meanwhile, China has upped its response to the crisis once again. 6 members of the Xizang Fire and Rescue Corps, along with 15 personnel and 1 search and rescue dog from the Sichuan Fire and Rescue Corps, have arrived at the China-Nepal border checkpoint. They are the first professional rescue teams to reach the core area of the rescue operation. Well, 3 people have been killed and 558 are still missing in Xizang. Rescue operations have been suspended due to risks posed by the overflow of the barrier lake above Zhejiang, which could trigger further flash flooding and mudslides. China has activated a Level 2 National Disaster Relief Emergency Response, the country's second highest emergency response level. So far, an 800-meter section of a key highway in Zhejiang County has been cleared, while all affected residents and tourists in Zhejiang town have been evacuated. Now, the China National Space Administration says satellites have been deployed to carry out emergency imaging of the mudslide-affected area. Rescuers are also using small unmanned aerial vehicles to detect human heat source signals, helping pinpoint the locations of those missing. Sen Zijuan has more.
What's happening here is that the road was being completely occupied by mud in this couple of days. Now at the specific location, we are about 2.4 kilometers away from the border gate. That's about 8 minutes drive from here. However, maybe if you take a look at further away right there are piles of mud that they have been cleared off the road. This is what they have been working on in the past few days. And maybe further away, you can see the speed of the water flow is really fast. And this because there was a report of overflow this morning from the barrier lake. So these are some of the challenges that the rescuers still have to face as they are working here to clear the road. And after that point, you can see a lot of excavators are working now. Those are the areas that we can reach with roads. And after that point, all the roads has been flushed. So they have to use speedboats to get to where the disaster really hit down there. And also, I want you to get a sense of how deep the mud is. My cameraman is going to show you the landscape right here. Maybe on top, you can see there are some of the green plants right there. And also, there are some bare surface. And that's how high that mud was. So you can see this area was severely impacted by the disaster. And we are going to be here for a few more hours because there is any chance of overflow. We have to we have to leave here, and the rescuer here has to be prepared underneath like very hot weather because the weather here changed really fast. And also we were experiencing some raindrops this morning. So these are the current situation here, and I will be keeping you updated as the rescue mission continues to push forward.
Meanwhile, China Media Group spoke by phone with the Jilin County head about the latest rescue efforts and the priorities ahead.
Our first priority is to properly accommodate those affected and make sure they are safely relocated. Second, we are carrying out a detailed count of those who remain unaccounted for and coordinating search and rescue operations for them. We moved nearly 500 people from 5 villages in 2 townships to 4 temporary shelters at the earliest possible time. Our focus is on providing temporary accommodation and meeting their basic needs. The barrier lake still poses a risk of secondary disasters. Jilin County is also seeing a relatively heavy rainfall, which could easily trigger further mudslides and landslides. These secondary hazards are making it more difficult to reopen roads and are also posing considerable challenges to search and rescue operations. Going forward, we will continue assessing the situation and carrying out disaster mitigation work to reduce the risks from the barrier lake as much as possible.
Well, let's get more details on this story. Ravinda Bauer joins us with the latest from Kathmandu in Nepal. Ravinda, thank you for joining us. It does appear to be a race against time for rescue efforts there. What's the latest you can bring us on this devastating mudslide?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, the rescue operations were halted for a brief while this afternoon. That was because there was a lake barrier breach which was reported, and there was a surge in the Bhotekoshi River, to which now in the response the military is actually trying to do an aerial inspection to assess the impact of this present surge. Since yesterday there was a warning of another flash flood, and a lot of people had moved out of that area, but this terrain is also very difficult because high up in the mountains, to come down to a safer location or to go higher up on the mountain is a task in itself. So at the moment rescue operations have restarted. What is happening is they are trying to get as many survivors out from these areas who are stranded. At the same time, the army has now deployed 1,200 more army personnel. Earlier 1,600 army personnel were deployed for rescue operations, but now 1,200 have been specifically deployed to look for the people who have lost their lives, the dead bodies under the debris. The debris is, mind you, not less than 6 to 7 feet high. What we saw yesterday there in a town which is closest to Kathmandu, which is the last town which has seen this kind of devastation, called Trishuli, where we have seen buildings are submerged under the debris. That kind of debris, trucks are just inside the debris. So it is a difficult task for the rescue workers as well, but definitely the situation is devastating. It's unimaginable what unfolded 2 days back here in this region. Back to you.
Right. And Ravinda, what can you tell us about why there were so many tourists in the region when the mudslide happened, given that it's not the best time to scale Mount Everest since it is monsoon season?
Well, this is the time of religious pilgrimage, and a number of people want to visit the Mount Sarovar, and the route which is shortest and cheapest goes via this area. That's why they have chosen this route. This time there has been a record registration of 13,500 pilgrims who were going to travel over the next few days, who were in transit, some who were coming back after the pilgrimage and some who were going, and maximum number of the foreigners who are stranded or missing lives are Indians who for them this is a religious journey. At the same time, Langtang National Park is one of the most visited national parks. It is a tourist area where the homestays are very popular. So it's also for tourism people had come. For religious journey, there is one lake up there where the Nepalese have a lot of faith in, and they also travel at this time during the monsoon, because this is the period when you have to visit these areas. Of course, not a very good season. It is a little problematic in terms of landslides and other things, but definitely this is the time they can travel. So it was mostly pilgrims and some tourists who had come for their recreational purposes, but mostly pilgrims in the number of people who are missing. Mahia.
All right, Ravinda, thank you very much for speaking to us and for those updates. Ravinda Bawa there speaking to us from Kathmandu. Well, 6 South Africans are among hundreds of tourists unaccounted for following the devastating floods in Nepal. South Africa's Gift of the Givers has an 11-member search and rescue team on standby to assist with rescue efforts. The police have also authorized 4 canine handlers and their dogs to join the team. They are all waiting for a formal request for international assistance before they can deploy. Meanwhile, Washington has ruled out any negotiations with Iran, saying all options for the U.S. still remain on the table. Reports in the U.S. say the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt is heading to the Middle East in the coming weeks. Nick Harper reports now from Washington.
The fact that that new aircraft carrier is heading in that direction, on top of the USS George Washington that is currently in the region, having just replaced the USS Abraham Lincoln, all of those warships, the aircraft carrier strike groups, very much in the region to exert that military pressure on Iran to try and create some leverage to get them to do the things that the United States wants. That military presence making it clear that really the US president could return to military action if he chose to do so. And Donald Trump has been speaking over the course about the situation in the Middle East, giving an interview in which he said the conflict will continue for as long as necessary. He said that he feels the US is achieving a very big victory, but he also said that there is no plan at the moment to return to negotiations with Iran. So really we have that military pressure there in the Middle East, but we've also seen this week a change in tactics by the Trump administration, now exerting economic pressure as well, putting in sanctions on 60 individuals and companies around the world that are trading with Iran, but also threatening to place blanket sanctions on any country that continues to trade with the country, really trying to cut off any financial revenue streams that Iran still has. So exerting pressure, but still not achieving what it's trying to achieve, and that is that longer-term peace deal with Iran.
And that is all we have for you on this edition of The World Today. Do stay with us. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Chad accuses Sudan of cross-border strike and raises its alert level. Nigerian police warn rushed rescue could endanger mass kidnapping victims in Niger State. And UN chief says $1.1 billion more urgently needed to fight Ebola outbreak as the DRC begins vaccination campaign. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. Wherever you're joining us, I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Here's what else is coming up. In business, extensive power cuts in Sudan hurt rebuilding efforts. And in sports, marathon world record holder Sebastian Sawe pulls out of the Berlin Marathon due to injury. Well, we begin today with Chad, which has accused Sudan's military of carrying out an airstrike inside its territory last week, hitting a military convoy in the eastern Ennedi region. The country has raised its alert level in the area to its highest point now. Chad says Sudanese aircraft and drones pursued and bombed the convoy more than 100 kilometers inside its borders, though no Chadian casualties were reported. Sudan has rejected the accusations, saying its forces are defending the country's sovereignty and that any blame should come after an independent investigation. UN experts say Chad has been used as a route to supply crucial weapons from the United Arab Emirates to the Rapid Support Forces. The UAE and Chad deny the allegations. Now, the conflict between the Sudanese army and the RSF is in its fourth year now, and many fear it could spill into neighboring countries. The African Union has urged restraint, warning against further regional escalation. Meanwhile, Sudan has lifted a 2-year curfew and a state of emergency in Khartoum, allowing residents to move and work around the clock. Authorities say security checkpoints and army patrols will remain in place. However, foreign nationals will also face restrictions on entry into Khartoum state. Now, the curfew, first imposed in May 2024, had restricted movement of people and vehicles from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. local time. Meanwhile, the UN is urging calm in northern Ethiopia amid renewed security concerns and rising tensions, warning against actions that could undermine efforts toward lasting peace. UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric and said Secretary General Antonio Guterres welcomed renewed mediation efforts by African Union High Representative for the Horn of Africa and former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo.
Turning to Ethiopia, I can tell you that the Secretary General is concerned by recent reports of security incidents and heightened tensions in northern Ethiopia. He underscores the importance of maintaining calm and sustaining progress towards lasting peace. He welcomes the renewed efforts of the African Union's High Representative for the Horn of Africa, and that is the former president of Nigeria, Mr. Obasanjo. That includes the recent consultations by Mr. Obasanjo in Addis Ababa and in Tigray province. The Secretary General urges all parties to support this initiative and takes this opportunity to advance dialogue on outstanding issues. The Secretary General calls on parties to refrain from actions and rhetoric that could heighten tensions, and that urges all to recommit fully to the comprehensive implementation of the permanent cessation of hostilities agreement.
Over to Nigeria now, where police say they are cautiously proceeding with rescue operations for the victims of last week's mass kidnapping in Niger State. Gunmen carried out the coordinated assault on August the 21st. Officials say they have yet to establish the exact number of abductees, despite dedicated efforts to trace the victims. CGTN's Wanja Mungai has that story.
Police in Niger State embarking on rescue operations are urging caution and patience.
Rescue operation is a very delicate job and it's very technical. We have to be very careful. In the process of trying to save life, you don't just cause more damage. The people you are trying to rescue at the end of the day, if you rush it, you might end up losing the lives of these victims. So it's not about timing, it's about how prepared are we? It's about analyzing our intelligence. It's about analyzing all the strategies we need to put in place and doing the needful to ensure that we get these victims and rescue them unhurt.
Last Friday's raid on a mosque in Dakar village has caused panic in Nigeria, where banditry and abductions have become rampant in recent years, with kidnappers demanding hefty sums of money in ransom. Residents say about 600 women, children and seniors were abducted in one of Nigeria's most brazen kidnappings. Police, however, have not confirmed the number of victims.
As we continue to interact with community members, we may be able to come up with an estimated number of people. Even if we get that, you may be surprised that at the end of the day, when these victims are finally rescued, it might also be higher or be lesser. But figures, as soon as we have it readily, we'll make it available to you.
In a video making rounds on social media, gunmen are seen with the victims in the bush as they address the families, asking them to identify their relatives. Residents of Dakar have since appealed to federal and state authorities to secure the release of their loved ones. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
Now, a new report is highlighting the extent of Nigeria's kidnapping crisis. Security consultancy SBM Intelligence says more than 7,800 people were abducted in the past year, with confirmed ransom payments approaching $6 million. The findings come amid renewed concern over mass kidnappings in northern Nigeria. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma has the details.
Kidnapping for ransom is becoming an increasingly lucrative business in Nigeria. The SBM Intelligence report shows 7,825 people were kidnapped between July 2025 and June 2026, a 66% increase from the previous year. At least 1,142 people were killed, while confirmed ransom payments more than tripled to 7.78 billion naira, or about $5.8 million. The consultancy says the figures are conservative because many ransom payments are never reported.
In the last 1 year, we've had over 7,000 victims kidnapped in the last 1 year. That means there are 21 victims kidnapped in this country every day. That is just the report we have.
The report says Boko Haram accounted for about 90% of recorded ransom payments in the northeast, although the northwest recorded more kidnapping incidents and victims. The findings come as President Bola Tinubu orders security forces to rescue up to 600 civilians reportedly abducted last week in Niger State. For security analysts, tackling the business behind the abductions is critical.
Once you can identify that this is a known base for where kidnapped victims are being hidden, we need to completely neutralize that place. That's number one. Number two, like I said, the economy has to work, inflation has to come down, there has to be jobs for people, or else people will be recruited into terrorist groups, civilian citizens will be recruited into bandit groups, so that, because if terrorists and kidnappers can amass about 7 billion naira in ransom in the space of 1 year, this is one of the biggest and largest informal economies in this country.
The report says kidnappings are also disrupting education, with schools among the targets. It warns that unless Nigeria tackles both the profitability of kidnapping and the conditions that enable recruitment into armed groups, the crisis could become further entrenched. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Let's take you back to our top story, where China has upped its response to the crisis in Nepal once again. 6 members of the Xizang Fire and Rescue Corps, along with 15 personnel and 1 search and rescue dog from the Sichuan Fire and Rescue Corps, have arrived at the China-Nepal border checkpoint. They are the first professional rescue teams to reach the core area of the rescue operation. Back to the African continent, the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo has spread across 6 provinces now, with more than 2,500 deaths recorded. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says containment efforts are falling behind the pace of transmission and is appealing for additional funding. Meanwhile, a vaccination campaign is underway, beginning with frontline health workers. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma has the details.
The race to contain Ebola is intensifying in the DRC. And the UN says international attention and funding are urgently needed to prevent the epidemic from becoming even deadlier.
My main message is this. The outbreak is the fastest growing Ebola epidemic on record. It is growing faster and wider than the response to contain it.
Guterres says the UN's $2.13 billion humanitarian response plan is only 48% funded, with current resources expected to last just weeks. He is appealing for another $1.1 billion to sustain and expand the response.
The world has the knowledge, the means and the resources to stop this outbreak. It's time to summon the collective determination to act before the cost becomes more deadly, more difficult and more expensive.
Meanwhile, in the northeastern city of Kisangani, immunization has begun among frontline health workers.
To date, we have already received more than 50,000 doses of vaccines, and we will therefore begin this vaccination campaign. We will cover all the provinces that are around Ituri, moving in a ring toward the center of the outbreak.
But the vaccination drive faces a major challenge. There's currently no approved vaccine or treatment for the rare Bundibujo species of Ebola. The vaccine being deployed was developed for the Zaire strain, and its effectiveness against Bundibujo is still being assessed through a clinical trial.
Since it is a viral disease, I do not doubt that this vaccine will also do for us, this time with the Bundibujo type.
The World Health Organization says transmission in the DRC is still out of control, with insecurity, displacement and disruptions to health services complicating containment efforts. Health workers continue to confront the risk of infection despite protective measures in place.
Even with all the precautions, a mistake can always happen. And unfortunately, we see some people getting infected even though they were well protected.
As the UN says, the world has the tools to stop Ebola, but it warns that without faster action and more resources, the cost of the outbreak will continue to rise. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
An Egyptian pharmaceutical company is developing a potential vaccine against Bundibujo. That's the Ebola strain that's sweeping through the eastern DRC. Minapharm is receiving funding to advance the vaccine toward human trials. Now, the candidate is being developed using technology designed by Minapharm's Berlin-based subsidiary ProBiogen. CGTN's Sharon Baranga reports.
A new effort to fight one of Africa's deadliest Ebola outbreaks is coming from an Egyptian pharmaceutical company. Minapharm says it is developing a vaccine candidate targeting the rare Bundibujo species, a strain for which there is currently no specifically approved vaccine or treatment. The Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, or CEPI, is committing up to $16.5 million to move the candidate through laboratory development and into a phase 1 clinical trial. That first stage of human testing is designed primarily to assess the vaccine's safety and whether it can trigger an immune response. The trial is expected to take place in Africa. Health officials from the African Union say an African company advancing a vaccine for an African outbreak could help build the continent's own capacity to develop and manufacture medical tools. The scale of the outbreak in the DRC has put pressure on efforts to contain the virus. According to the WHO's latest figures, more than 5,600 confirmed cases and over 2,700 deaths have been recorded in the country since the outbreak was declared on May 15th. For now, the Minapharm candidate must first demonstrate that it is safe and can trigger an adequate immune response in clinical trials before its effectiveness can be established. CEPI hopes at least 2 Bundibujo vaccine candidates will successfully make it through clinical trials and prove effective enough to eventually receive WHO approval. Meanwhile, the WHO has recommended a full-scale human trial in the DRC to determine whether Ivabo, an approved Ebola vaccine for the Zaire strain, can offer cross-protection against Bundibujo. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
Health ministers from across Africa have wrapped up a pivotal week in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, as the World Health Organization's 76th Regional Committee meeting concluded on Thursday. The ministers deliberated on Africa's key health priorities and endorsed 4 new strategies to tackle the continent's biggest health challenges. Becca Atoma reports now from Addis Ababa.
Health ministers from 47 countries in WHO's Africa region gathered here in Addis Ababa over the past few days to find solutions to the continent's most pressing health issues, one among them being a severe health workforce shortage. The region currently has only about 46% of the health workers it needs, and without action, the gap could even expand further. To tackle the crisis, the ministers adopted the Africa Health Workforce Agenda, a 10-year plan to train, employ and retain 3 million additional health workers.
You know the projection by 2030 there will be a deficit of 11 million. Unfortunately, 6 million from our continent. Africa, 2022 to 2024, train almost 500,000. So the question is not only retaining. How do you train, retain the workers? A number of things were decided yesterday, how to retain our workers, how to improve, and how to discuss even with the Northern Globe.
With significant cuts in external aid, health financing across the WHO's Africa region has come under severe pressure. The strategy for financing the future of health in the African region 2026 to 2035, endorsed by ministers this week, therefore urges member states to raise more money domestically, spend it more efficiently, and make health budgets more shock resistant.
Of course, domestic financing is very important because we need to be able to mobilize some domestic resources to do what we should be doing. Now, in the Gambia, the government is committing increased resources for the provision of essential medicines, for the improvement of current health facilities, and for building more health facilities, and also for training more and more people.
The ministers also endorsed 2 further regional strategies, one to boost early childhood development and another to strengthen how countries regulate medical products. They additionally endorsed WHO Africa's flagship strategic framework, A New Era of Health for Africa, United Action for Vision 2035. As WHO's biggest annual event for the African region comes to a close, ministers leave with new resolutions endorsed and commitments made. The real test now lies in turning those commitments into action. Becca Atoma, CGTN, Addis Ababa.
In Algeria, wildfires have devastated several provinces, killing at least 12 people and forcing residents from their homes. In Jijel province, residents are returning to villages reduced to ashes, surveying the damage left behind by the flames. CGTN's Sharon Baranga reports.
What was once home to families in Anchid, a village in northeast Algeria's Jijel province, is now a landscape of burnt buildings, destroyed vehicles and blackened trees. The devastation follows a wave of wildfires that swept across several northern provinces during an intense heat wave. They caught many residents totally off guard.
These wildfires have impacted all of us this year. We have not witnessed this in our entire life, never known in the history of this mountain. The fire has left neither the dry nor the green.
Residents say the fire spread rapidly, leaving little time to escape. According to Algeria's interior minister, at least 5 people were killed in Jijel province, 4 others died in Bejaya and 3 in Tizi Ouzou. Dozens more suffered burn injuries.
Over there at Achral village, we lost my neighbor's uncle Al Said Hanoun. He died in front of my house, engulfed by flames. Another person went to rescue his sheep from the stable and free them so that they don't burn, but he was engulfed in flames and died because of it.
The destruction stretches across the villages, with homes and olive farms among the losses. One resident says his family fled to nearby Boj Tahar as the flames approached.
The fires came from the mountain in the Tograst region at night, and in moments they spread everywhere with smoke. The person who was driving this vehicle was surprised by the fires, so he left it and ran away to save himself. We left our homes and ran away to the town of Burj Tahar. We are sleeping out in the open. The fires destroyed everything: houses, fruit-bearing trees, especially olive trees. Nothing is left. All of our homes are burnt.
Algeria's Civil Protection Services recorded 154 wildfires across the country on Wednesday. 36 were reported in Béjaïa province alone, with 18 brought under control. As the heatwave continues across North Africa, residents in the worst hit areas know once the fire subsides, they will be left with the difficult task of rebuilding their homes, livelihoods, and communities in a challenging economy. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
Right, it's time for a short break. Here's what's coming up in the business. Extensive power cuts in Sudan hurt rebuilding efforts. And South Africa's Northam Platinum to pay its highest ever dividend after a nearly 8-fold rise in profit.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Let's begin in Egypt, where sources say gas producer Energen is in exclusive talks to buy some of BP's oil and gas assets in the North African country. The deal could raise around $1 billion for BP. It includes BP's stakes in the producing offshore West Nile Delta fields, jointly owned with Harbour Energy, as well as BP's 50% contractor working interest in the Temsa concession in the Eastern Mediterranean. Temsa co-owner Eni announced a major gas discovery there this year, estimating the Denise West well holds around 2 trillion cubic feet of gas. Eni said this week the companies and the Egyptian government are working towards a final investment decision on the discovery in the coming months. BP, which has invested more than $35 billion in Egypt over 6 decades, produced 518 million cubic feet per day of natural gas in the country last year. Now, as Nigeria prepares for general elections next January, one of the big talking points is petrol subsidies. The incumbent Bola Tinubu government removed subsidies in 2023, and the country has since seen prices go up. But former Vice President Atiku Abubakar now says he will reinstate petrol subsidies if he is elected president. Here is CGTN's Deji Bademosi with more on that story.
It's been almost 4 years now since Tinubu ended Nigeria's decades-long petrol subsidies.
I saw one of my opponents now say we go back to subsidy. I read it. That is demonstration of a serious ignorance on governance and economy. Before I came here, 27 states are unable to pay salaries, not to even talk of pensioners, salary of workers.
On the streets, citizens are also weighing in.
Subsidy remover, I don't know what it has done for us actually. We don't know if there are blessings, we don't know, but ordinarily if you observe the people and the atmosphere, there seems not to be any visible blessing in the remover. So subsidy in itself is good.
As far as I'm concerned, the only way the masses enjoy this government is by fuel subsidy. So we are looking at a day where the fuel price will resume back to the original pump price. So if there's any candidate that will bring back fuel subsidy, yes, I will always support that idea because it's the best and it's the only thing the masses enjoy in any government in Nigeria.
Until it was formally scrapped in May 2023, Nigeria's petrol subsidy was both opaque and steeped in corruption. The government claims it's made substantial savings since its removal.
So let me tell you about the numbers. Between June 2023 and December 2025, subsidy savings mobilized the sum of 15.8 trillion naira in resources for the Federation. Out of these 15.8 trillion naira savings, from June 2023 to December 2025, according to the Federation account, the share of the federal government was 5.4 trillion naira, while 10.4 trillion was shared to states and local governments.
But the opposition had this to say.
This government has failed woefully in addressing the issue of subsidy. It has allowed leakages, it has allowed pitfalls, it has allowed some cartel in the industry to continue to operate, and they become, extremely and ridiculously opulent when Nigerians are languishing further into abject poverty.
The elections will be a test of the new strategy's success. Petrol subsidy could become the biggest economic topic in this campaign season for the January presidential election. The irony is that in 2023, all the major candidates, including Abubakar and Tinubu, were on the same side on the subject. They all campaigned for the removal of petrol subsidies. But now, they are on opposing sides. Deji Badimas is CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
South Africa's Northam Platinum has reported an almost eightfold jump in annual profit, helped by record production and higher platinum group metal prices. The strong results allowed the miner to declare a record final dividend of about 62 cents a share. That brings Northam's total dividend for the financial year to roughly $426 million. The company said the basket price for its platinum group metals increased 57%, helping push revenue up 64% to about $3.4 billion. Now, the strong results come as Northam considers its options after receiving an unsolicited takeover offer from an unnamed major South African platinum producer. Artificial intelligence may be designed in Silicon Valley, but some of the human labor that makes those systems run is here in Kenya. For years, locals have been employed to moderate online content and train AI systems. CGTN's Ian Kinyua takes a look at the country's evolving role in the human infrastructure behind the AI supply chain.
Every time you search online or interact with an AI system, there's a layer of work most users never see. And the work is broader than simply deleting offensive posts. The International Labour Organization documents that Kenyan digital workers are carrying out data collection, labeling verification, content moderation, and machine learning work. In other words, human workers are helping prepare the information that AI systems learn from. The scale of Kenya's involvement is difficult to measure because much of the work is outsourced to contractors. But an ILO study gives an indication of the type of work being performed. Among 161 Kenyan microtask workers surveyed, 95% reported doing AI or machine learning related work. 23% reported doing content moderation work. One of the clearest examples of this business model has been Nairobi-based outsourcing company Sama, which previously provided content moderation services to Meta platforms. Workers in Nairobi screen posts, videos, messages, and other user content for violations of platform rules. The company later moved away from content moderation and toward AI data labeling services. Companies are increasingly using human workers to prepare and label data for AI systems. The shift also exposes how dependent these global technologies remain on people working behind the scenes. But this emerging digital economy has also brought scrutiny over labor conditions. Former content moderators here in Kenya are involved in a legal dispute with Meta and Summer. The workers allege low pay, inadequate mental health support, and difficult working conditions. So as Kenya tries to build a wider business, process outsourcing and digital services industry, its existing workforce is already participating in the global AI data supply chain. But the challenge is whether Kenya can move away from providing relatively low-cost human input to capturing more of the high-value work created by AI. The screens may be in Nairobi, the companies may be in Silicon Valley, and the technology may be artificial, but the labor behind it all is very real. Kenya's experience shows that the future of AI will not be built by algorithms alone. It will also depend on the people behind the scenes. For Kenya, the question now is whether the human role can be a sustainable, high-value part of the global AI economy. Ian Kinywa, CGTN.
Right, and here's what's coming up in sports. Marathon world record holder Sebastian Sawe pulls out of the Berlin Marathon due to injury.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa.